Hello and welcome to the Real Estate Regroup Show. I am your host, LJ Walker, here to give you some information about Michael Jackson that you probably did not know. As a matter of fact, I just pretty much found out a few little things as well. Did you know that Neverland almost never was? All right, let me get into it. First, let's go back. Michael Jackson actually first visited Neverland back in 1983. He was doing a video with Paul McCartney. Here's the thing though. Paul McCartney did not get permission from the person who actually owned the property, whose name was William Bone. Well, somebody who happened to be on the property called Mr. Bone and mentioned that a video was being filmed without his knowledge. And Mr. Bone said, no, they need to get off my property. I was born here in America, and I swear I feel as though the culture has changed, because I was under the impression that if you go on someone's property without their permission, you are trespassing. And especially if you go in their house, that's breaking and entering. So I know Mr. Paul McCartney is not American, but wow, it interesting. I found that part very, very, very interesting. So anyway, Michael Jackson actually, his first visit, he was kicked off and he was only really there for a few hours. It's not like he was there the whole entire day. So I need you to stick a pin in that right there. All right. So later on, as Michael Jackson matured, he did have at that time, I believe, 50% of Havenhurst, and he also had that condo, which I spoke about in another video. He wanted something, though, away from the family, a little secluded, and a place where he can build and relive his childhood, right? That's when his realtor, Gloria Berlin, she's also a friend of the family, took him back to that ranch that William Bone owned. It was 1988. That's when William Bone was selling the property. Okay, so at that time, because Michael was trying to buy property, that is when he came back on 5 years later in 1988. Stick a pin in that as well. Now, the reason why it took a little bit longer, it wasn't necessarily like a fast close. The reason why it took long is because Michael Jackson actually assembled an investment team, and they were actually against Michael buying this ranch. The main reason was because it was going to be something like in the tune of $10 million a year just to maintain it. So after he bought the property, and the property that William Bone, he listed it for $100 million. All right. And then it's a $10 million to update every year. So his advisors was like, no. And they gave the realtor a lot of pushback. But here's what happened, though. The realtor was able to negotiate it down to about 17 million, I believe. And more negotiations continued afterwards. So I say to this, kudos to the investment team and the realtor for bringing down a $100 million asking price house down to 17. That's an incredible thing, because normally when you do a negotiation on the asking price, it may come down to 90 or 85 million from 100. But to come all the way down to 17 is like, wow. Now, the only thing that I can think of, or things that I can think of, that may have been the part of the negotiation strategy is the fact that the building codes and the zoning laws in that part of California where the Neverland Ranch is restrictive. They did not want to have tourists coming. See, it was Michael Jackson's plan from the beginning, not just to build Neverland so that it's can relive or renew his childhood, but also to have his fans come back on the property when he passes so that it would be like Graceland. But since they had those laws and the code from back then, that's probably why it wasn't going to happen. Okay? And if you look at the demographic and you look at the population of that part of where Neverland is, okay, it's not very diverse, first and foremost. It's not just racially diverse. I mean, age-wise, it's really not that diverse. So here is a young Michael Jackson, because Michael was still in the prime. He was like in his 20s or so, late 20s, early 30s, right? When he got that property. And surrounding him are older, much, much, much older people who are trying to protect their property, let's say, from potential crime, trash, as far as sanitation, things of that nature. So no, they did not really care for that. And the way I know that this is part of the reason or part of the issue is because William Bone himself, he had wanted to build a country club on that property, and it never came to pass. But I guess Michael felt that because at that time he had a great reputation, he was on top of the music industry, so I guess he felt that, since they were able to negotiate it down, they would be able to go to the board and negotiate with them. Michael, from my understanding, he did go and try to negotiate with like the zoning board, the planning board of the place, but unfortunately, nothing changed before he died. And I believe it's because a lot of times people, when they are of a certain age, they can be set in their ways. I know that's a stereotype, but that is something that many of us who are in the real estate game, many of us have run across. So a lot of times before we even buy something, we go to the planning board. We talk to them. We talk to the commissioners before. And honestly, that is something I wish I had done before I bought the properties that I did in Georgia. Okay. So there you have it. So now Michael, he had to, and I know that there were some severe restrictions because remember, there was no hospital on that property until Michael came, bought it, and built it. And when you're building a hospital, you have to deal with stricter codes than if you were to, let's say, build another type of business or even an apartment building or another house. So Michael went through a whole lot with Neverland. And then on top of that, after all the accusations came up against him and wore him out, he was like, you know what, I'm not even feeling Neverland anymore, which is such a shame because there was so much money that was put into that place, not just to buy it, not just in taxes, not just in maintenance, but in building it up to the way he wanted it to be. You understand me? So, yeah, it was sad. But you know what else, though? what the part that I didn't know was that he was looking for another place to turn into Neverland. And one of those places actually was Albany, New York. I kind of understand why he didn't go with Albany though, because Albany can be quite cold. The snow can be quite high. So I can and it is, most of his family is actually in California, not so much in New York. I know Janet has an apartment here, but most of them really, California is where they stay. So I kind of understand why he didn't go with Albany, New York, but he could have went with some other states. I'm pretty sure, Gloria Berlin, who was his realtor, who did an excellent job with negotiating. I'm pretty sure, she showed him a number of properties. As many of you know, one of the properties was actually in Florida. And that was the house that Epstein actually owned. But Michael Jackson was not feeling that home in Florida. And if you look at that picture real close, you can see that the only person that has half of a smile is Epstein. Michael did not look all that happy to be in that location, right? It's not really said why, but it is a fact. So now here's the other thing that I wanted to point out. And what I wanted to point out was, speaking of Epstein, is the fact that James Safechuck, I looked it up. I said, okay, when did Michael meet James Safechuck? It was in 1986, 2 years before Michael bought Neverland. 3 years after he first stepped on the property. When did he meet Wade Robeson? 1987, 1 year before he bought Neverland. Yet they accused Michael of being inappropriate on Neverland Ranch before Michael bought the property. See, this is why the whole thing bothers me, because I saw somebody saying that, well, when it came to the Michael movie, they didn't want to bring up those things because they were trying to protect the victims, saying, James, Wade, Jordan were victims. Well, honestly, the real victim is Michael and us fans. That's who the real victims are. Because these allegations, if you really dig through them, they're false. And if you really look at the dates in which Michael actually first stepped on the property, when he actually met these people, and then when he actually bought the property, the dates don't line up at all. And I'm not sure why this was not presented to the public, because everybody, well, most people who have a brain would have said, oh, Michael is innocent. There wouldn't be no question at all. But it never was brought up until now. Okay. So anyway, guys, I'm cleared. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments section regarding this whole situation. All right. Do you think that, sometimes when people have a lot of money, sometimes they don't always listen to those who are giving them advice. So I'm not sure if Michael just wasn't listening to them, or if his realtor just really wanted a sale and was, sort of pushing that particular property on him. Because honestly, if I was a realtor, I would not have sold Neverland to Michael. If I was a realtor, I would have sold another property to Michael instead of that particular one. But you know what, guys? Who knows? Who knows? Because, a lot of people of a certain age, they're dying off. They're not going to be here for very long. So maybe at that time, the zoning laws will change, code enforcements will change, and maybe they will allow Neverland Ranch, and I know it's been renamed to something else, but it will always be Neverland Ranch to me, okay? Maybe they will say, okay, we will only allow certain tourist bus companies to come in, but we won't allow people to just drive up and tour the property as individuals. Maybe that is what's going to be put into play. All right. So guys, that's all I have for you. Hopefully the information will help you make smart financial moves. Feel free to pass this amongst your friends. Remember, each one, reach one, teach one. Bye for now. Until next time, have a good night.